You know, these playoffs have done a lot of exposing of players and teams that we've needed to get exposed for a minute. You have the Nets and their whole most skilled duo of all time narrative finally being put to bed. You got James Harden selling like he normally does, but the more recent one as of late has to be the Phoenix Suns. And I never thought I was gonna have to say this because I believed in them. I fell for the trap even though I saw the cracks forming as soon as the playoffs started, because last night the Phoenix Suns would lose in one of the most embarrassing blowout games I have ever seen in a game 7 with a score of 123-90. The game essentially ended by the end of the first quarter, and they not only lost a game 7, but they would lose in the second round, not even in the conference finals. This is definitely one of the more embarrassing losses I've seen in the NBA, especially considering that this is the second straight year that they're losing after being up 2-0. My goodness, social media was on that ass, especially Twitter. And I joined in on the fun. And by the way, make sure you follow me on social media because I be posting bangers on Twitter and my following's been growing a lot. So if you want to connect with me on there, make sure you go and do that. Don't forget to also drop a like and subscribe. But back to the Suns, let's talk about how they were the biggest frauds of 2022. Throughout the whole regular season, this was a team that was not only the best team in the Western Conference, but the best team in the league by far. With the 64-18 record, they also finished as a top 5 offense, finishing 5th in points per game, 4th in offensive rating, and a top 10 defense, finishing 8th in opponents' points per game and 3rd in defensive rating. And leading this team were two guys that people were swearing were MVP candidates over the last 2 seasons. For starters, you got Chris Paul, who people just swear his impact is insane, and trust me, we're gonna save his ass for later. And then you got Devin Booker, who's a great player, don't get me wrong, but people just swore he was being left out of MVP convo unfairly because he's on the best team in the league. Isn't that how it always goes? And with the great supporting cast of players that can contribute on both ends, like Mikal Bridges, Deandre Ayton, and many others, people really just penciled in the Phoenix Suns to make the NBA Finals because that was just the right thing to do at the time. Because not only were they the best team in the regular season by far, but they were literally 2 games away from an NBA championship last year as they were in the finals. But little did we fucking know that we were in for a humongous surprise with this team. My goodness, were we embarrassed as soon as round 1 began. Because in a series against a team that was missing their best player in Zion Williamson for the whole season and didn't even finish with an above 500 record as they had to make the playoffs through the play-in tournament, the Suns were at risk of losing that series not only because Brandon Ingram was cooking them, but because they were getting cooked by players like Jose Alvarado and Herb Jones. It really was a disgrace. Don't get me wrong, I know Chris Paul balled out and they did miss Devin Booker for a couple of games, but the way that they just let certain players cook them on the perimeter and in the paint was really a story. I mean, you have Mikal Bridges, who's known as this lockdown defender, but gets cooked by almost every single great wing in the league. Don't get me wrong, he does a great job on guards, but ever since he locked up Steph Curry in that one game earlier on in the season, he's just gotten this reputation as being, I don't know, Tony Allen or something. And he's still an elite defender, don't get me wrong, because there's more to defense than on ball, but his on ball defense is gassed and overrated in my personal opinion. And we not only saw it against the Mavericks, but we even saw it in the first round, because if you want to say Luka is Luka, what's the excuse for getting cooked by Ingram? Is Ingram just that good of a player? Or is it also that Mikal is just not that guy on defense when he has to guard wings? And if you want further proof of that, just look at the last 2 rounds last year in the playoffs. He got cooked by Chris Middleton in the finals, and he got cooked by Paul George in the conference finals. And aside from just Mikal Bridges, because there's somebody else that people are not giving enough blame and slander to, and that's Deandre Ayton, because from round 1, Deandre Ayton was getting exposed. And when I say that, I'm not even going to refer to his scoring. I know he had a 5-point game in game 7, but honestly, that's not my biggest issue with Deandre Ayton, because as a scorer, even though he's not Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid, he's not asked to be those guys, and he's pretty good in his own role. When he gets touches in the post hook is damn near unstoppable at certain points. He's also a great lob threat and a solid finisher at the rim. But my biggest issue with Ayton, as weird as this may sound to some people, because bigs don't really get criticized for this enough in my personal opinion, was his rebounding throughout the entire playoffs. I understand you're facing good rebounders in Jonas Valanciunas, I'll give you that, he's one of the best rebounders in the league, but the way he was getting bodied and bullied on the boards is really embarrassing. Because though rebounding is a very underrated skill in this league, a lot of it is effort and boxing out. And I just did not see that effort from Deandre Ayton, not only against the Pelicans, but even at times against the Mavericks. As not only was he out rebounded by Luka Doncic 10 rebounds to 8, but the man had multiple games in which he recorded less than 5 rebounds. That's unacceptable, because in a series where the Mavs don't have have rim protection or any type of interior presence that's consistent. This is supposed to be your series where you dominate in every way, shape, or form. And yes, he had his moments, but those moments weren't enough to get the job done, especially in a game 7 that's the biggest game of y'all season, and you go out there and drop a triple single. Are you serious? I mean, Ayton, you wanted to get paid this past offseason a max contract. My guy, you are not worth a max whatsoever. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care what he has to say, because it's just the truth. You're a good player, but you are not a great one, and you proved that this playoffs. And speaking of playoffs with the Suns, that brings us to our final duo themselves, Chris Paul and Devin Booker. As far as D-Book is concerned, honestly, I'm not gonna lie. As far as blame goes, D-Book gets his own blame, especially for game 6 and 7. Those were games that they should have closed out as a team, but D-Book just came up completely short as possible. And when you're going out there running your mouth saying that this is the Luka special when you flop into the crowd, then trying to do some slick shit taking the ball out of Luka's hands as if he's some random throwaway player, I'm at least expecting you to shoot better than 9 of 31 and also record 6 turnovers a game to 2 assists a game in the last 2 games of your season, bro. But outside of those 2 games, I can't lie, D-Book really wasn't that bad. But you want to know who was that bad for a good chunk of this series? The main guy that if you had to say who's the biggest culprit, my answer would be Chris Paul. Because I love CP3, that's one of my favorite players of all time, but he wet the bed so hard in this series, my goodness. And as I watch First Take and Get Up and all these shows that Pat Bev is on this morning, I have to say this man is spitting facts. Chris Paul has this persona of being a really nice guy, the State Farm commercials, the president of the NBPA, doing nice things in the community, and trust me, all those things are nice and handy, but it does shape our perception of this guy because he is a dirty ass motherfucker, I can't lie. I mean, I'll never forget how people just casually overlook him pushing Giannis in midair last year in the finals. But aside from that, I'm not really on the whole Chris Paul is a complete choker in the playoffs narrative train, because yes, he has folded a couple times, don't get me wrong. At the end of the day, a lot of players have folded in NBA history, some that even have more championships than Chris Paul, obviously. And to be honest, Chris Paul is just a real victim of injuries for the most part of his career in the playoffs, so I'm just gonna be real. You're not gonna get me to say Chris Paul is some big playoff fraud. That's just not what I'm about here. But what I will say is that there have been multiple opportunities, especially over the last 2 seasons, where he's come up short in big games that they've needed him to play well. And this series in particular, I gotta say, just straight up garbage in a lot of these games. I mean, we're talking scoring numbers that he was just stat padding at the end of the 4th quarter when they were already being blown out or they were already up big. Some games that he had more fouls than he had shots made, and uncharacteristic turnovers from the point guard that I was told plays the position more pure than anybody else of his generation. And if you want numbers to back up the things that I'm saying, just look at what he did in the last 5 games of that series. I mean, the shooting splits are great, 50-50, 75, fine. But as far as the rest of the box score, we're talking about a triple single here of 9 points, 6 assists, and 3 rebounds, along with nearly 4 turnovers a game and 4 personal fouls a game as well. I mean, it truly was embarrassing to see him go out there and miss open mid-range jumpers that he's made his career off of, and sometimes not even take them if we're being honest, because he was very passive. And the reason I'm really mad about this is because everybody gives Chris Paul so much credit for impacting this Suns team and being the sole reason why they were able to rise from the ashes. Well, where are all those people now? Because D-Book was outperforming him for most of this series, but it was Chris Paul who really sold them for a good chunk of it, which led to them losing in that catastrophe known as Game 7. The game that Chris Paul went 0 of 4 in the first half with 1 point and then decided to make 3 quick empty stat buckets in the 4th so he can get his stats up. This was truly a pathetic ass game for Chris Paul, and this is gonna hurt his legacy for the rest of his career, I can't lie to you. Especially considering that he is now 0 of 7 in Game 7s in his career, and now he has been a part of 4 teams that have blown 2-0 leads in the postseason. And like I said, Chris Paul's playoff failures are not all his fault, but this one is undeniably on his shoulders. Because as time continues to go by and Chris Paul continues to get older and players like Luka Doncic are just entering their primes, that just further lowers the chances of CP3 ever getting a championship or even going back to the finals. I mean, remember when CP3 was saying he's addicted to the finals? Well, I'm glad to see that addiction has finally been conquered, bro. But before I wrap things up, shout out to the Dallas Mavericks, man. I can't lie. This team balled out, and I gotta give them their credit, as well as Jason Kidd. Great coaching adjustments throughout the entire playoffs, in my opinion. And y'all know I gotta throw some big ups to Luka Doncic. My goodness, that white is so nice. But that wraps up this video. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and comment your opinions down below. I would love to know what you think about the Phoenix Suns. Were they the biggest frauds in the NBA this year? Because I surely think so. This is Your boy Young Mustard signing out. Y'all stay safe and have a blessed day. Peace.